On the Jewish calendar, there's a holiday called Tisha B'Av. And Rabbi Ariana would do a much better job of explaining this, but I'm going to do my best. Tisha B'Av recognizes all of the calamities that have befallen the Jewish people throughout their history, all of the suffering that they have endured throughout the millennia. And it's a time that is set aside for mourning and for grieving. And two of the main events that are remembered on that day are the destruction of the temple. The first temple by the Babylonians in 586 BCE, and the second temple by the Romans in 70 AD. And if you're thinking that a holiday of mourning and grieving over a calamity that happened not just once but twice is related to current events, yes, that is why I am thinking about it. You would be correct. But I also mention them because they're events that have shaped who we are as Christians, and we often don't recognize that. Because on both occasions, that was not simply the loss of a building. Those were intentional attempts by the empire to erase the Jewish way of life and to eradicate them as a people. Everything came together at the temple. It wasn't just a religious place. It was important politically, socially, economically. And when the temples were destroyed, the Jewish people were scattered from their homeland. They were taken into captivity and exile by the Babylonians the first time, and they were purposely driven out by the Romans the second time. And the destruction of these temples posed a serious, challenging question for the Jewish people, and continues to pose a serious, challenging question. What do you do when a foreign power ends the sacrificial system? God's relationship with God's people had for centuries been mediated through these offerings of animals who were presented and sacrificed at the temple in Jerusalem. It was the way that relationship was restored when humanity, time and time again, broke that relationship with God. And it was gone. With no temple, there were no sacrifices and no way to be made right again with God. And Jewish rabbis have, through the years, come up with a lot of different answers to what is an existential problem. What do we do as a people when our whole relationship with God has been shattered? And there is, to this day, a diversity of thought within Jewish traditions about how to approach this question. Christianity came out of one of those streams of thought. And you first start to see it in the prophets of the exile, like Isaiah and Jeremiah. And they promise that the ending of the sacrificial system and the destruction of the temple is not the end of God's relationship with God's people. That God has not abandoned the people of God, but is doing something new. And when that something new comes about, it's going to bring God's light and love to the whole world. It's not the end of God's plan for redemption. It is the birth pains of something larger and more expansive. It is God's design for Jews and Gentiles to be reconciled to God and to one another. And that's where our reading from Hebrews comes in today. The author is speaking from within that prophetic and exilic tradition. And they're telling us that this larger plan has now been revealed to us in Jesus Christ. That God has replaced the system of animal sacrifices, imperfect sacrifices. God has replaced the human priests who are full of human failings. And God has replaced a physical temple that can be destroyed with a once and for all sacrifice of himself. God becomes a human being and dies on our behalf, becomes our priest who represents us perfectly before God, and enters into a heavenly temple that no empire can touch. The promise that God made to the Jewish prophets has been fulfilled. because now God is with them wherever they go. And in fact is bringing other nations of the world into God's people through them. And I say all of this right now because it's an important time to remind ourselves we are a people of exile, not a people of empire. God did not bring us together so that we would form a Christian Babylon or a Christian Rome. There is no such thing. Christianity and empire are not compatible with one another. It is easier when we feel like we have some level of power to forget that. It becomes easier to confuse our empire with the heavenly kingdom that we actually are citizens of. We are already part of a kingdom because of Christ's death and resurrection, and our allegiance is owed only to that kingdom. We get tempted when empire tells us that it will give us things to believe that empire is doing good things. But when empire reveals itself again for what it truly is, a power that divides and excludes and oppresses and ultimately kills, it focuses us more clearly that we are called to be a people who does none of those things. We are called to be a people who unite and who include and who lift up those who have been marginalized and who bring life and love wherever we go. The sins of empire that we are seeing on full display right now are not new. I will not go through a full litany of American failures, but this is a country that stole its land from Native Americans. It enslaved, lynched, and continues to criminalize black people. It has consistently denied the full humanity of women. It has regularly demonized the immigrants who came here seeking a better life. And it has always attacked and excluded people on the basis of their gender identities and sexual orientations. We're seeing it really clearly in this moment. We're seeing it on full display. But it has always been what American empire has been about. Here's the good news, though. We have always had people who understood the assignment and recognized that we were people of exile. The first exiles, the Jews who were taken as captives to Babylon, were told by the prophet Jeremiah not to seek the restoration of empire, but to seek the good of the city where they had been sent into exile. And we've seen examples of people doing that work throughout American history. People who did not think that empire was the answer, but who recognized that we had to seek the good of people around us while empire was doing its work. We had the Underground Railroad, which helped people escape from slave states and get to places where they could be free and safe. The women's suffrage movement and the civil rights movement, which both refused to follow the unjust laws of the empire in order to get people's humanity fully recognized. Labor movements who stopped the economy until workers were treated with the dignity and respect that they deserved. And the sanctuary and new sanctuary movements, which housed immigrant families in churches and kept them safe and united when the empire threatened to tear them apart. Those are all really good things to be doing when you were reminded that you are in exile. We do not need control of the White House or Congress or any of the other tools of the empire in order to be the people of God. We never have, we never will. It is absolutely appropriate to mourn and to grieve, to be angry, confused, to feel all of the things we feel right now about the fact that the people who are coming into power have promised to use those tools of empire to hurt people that we love. And we should keep feeling those feelings. There is no moving on. There is no forgetting about that fact. What we do is we're honest about those emotions, and we bring them to this table. And at this table, we are reminded that Christ's sacrifice has already reconciled us to God and to one another. And we have already been saved by his death and resurrection. And as we eagerly await his return, our job now is to keep welcoming people to this table. To make sure that everyone knows that in here they have a seat. That in here, this is going to be a safe place. This is a place where God has invited everyone to come. And if we're going to be a people of exile, we're going to have to just keep doing that. Because that's what God has given us to do. Amen.
Amen.